Hi everyone, Mike DelRose Jr. here with the DelRose McShane team of Caldwell Banker Realty. I'm joined by my colleagues Mike Simoni and Mike DelRose Sr.
Hello, good morning.
We're going to get into the case study about proper pricing, and this week is kind of a continuation of last week where we talked about that off-market potential scenario and how a buyer missed the opportunity and the property ended up selling way higher than they were offered the property at. But this week's case study is really a focus on strategic pricing and how to maximize value. This can go in a lot of different directions. But basically, I'll start off by explaining how I priced this particular listing that maximized the selling price, got 8 offers on it. And then we'll talk about some of the factors that come into that. Any first thoughts?
Well, when we're talking about pricing, one of the things, having been in the business quite some time, the old strategy was price a property as high as you want, and we can always come down. And that old school of thinking actually hurts a consumer today because buyers and sellers have all the same information. Back in the day they didn't. So with having the same information, having properly priced properties is a better strategy than having something that's overpriced and expecting to reduce the price over time.
One thing I want to ask you specifically about, because I don't know if it happens as much, but I think it just happened to me the last couple of weeks where I went on a listing presentation and after seeing the property, I gave my opinion of value. And then it comes out higher than I recommended at with another agent. You don't take that personally, but what has happened traditionally is agents will buy listings. And I know you've seen a ton of that. Can you kind of explain about buying listings and what that does?
Sure. So if a an agent is out in the field trying to you know obtain listings and getting a listing from a with a homeowner, sometimes they don't have the skill set, the marketing programs, the support of a team, the support of a professional organization such as Coldwell Banker that we belong to. And so they're trying to, what do they have to sell of themselves? If they're inexperienced, they don't have the great marketing, they don't have good negotiating skills. Well, what's left is to sometimes say, well, I think your house is worth more, and emotions take over for a seller, and it's a normal reaction. Say, well, they think my house is worth more. I'm gonna hire that person instead of the market drives price, selling price. Strategically pricing a home is more valuable to a seller, and then coupled with the skills of a good broker, they're going to maximize their home, not overpricing it. So
Excellent.
that's
Yeah.
called like buying a listing is. I've got nothing else to offer you. Here, let me tell you, your house is worth more than it is.
I've actually reframed the way I have this conversation with home sellers. And what I give them, I tell them there's three real numbers here. There's the lower end of market value, the higher end of market value, and a potential selling price based on what we've seen with buyers overpaying in the short term. Because in the long term, if they're staying for 5 to 7 years, that money is not gonna it's gonna be negligible over the course of their home appreciation and their values. Buyers have been having to do that for quite some time in this market, but that's why you have three different prices here. And with the situation that I just kind of explained in detail last week, where we got 8 offers, 6 of those over asking, an escalation clause, and one that blew everyone else away. Um, it was all about understanding the differences in the range of fair market value and where to position this unit. So I'll start by going into a little bit more detail. This is regarding a two-bedroom condo in Waltham listed at 425. And the problem with this property was at the time, this is early spring, inventory was sitting from the winter still. And what that meant was you saw a bunch of two-bedroom units with the same square footage. This one was at 730 in brick buildings. There was a handful of them. There was like maybe 6 to 8 of them in Waltham. And mine was the same thing. It had more amenities. It was better than those, but if I went out at 435 and recommended my seller go out at that price, they obviously get a higher price tag, but the likelihood that that sits is a little bit longer, and then they're going to end up dropping it down. And what I wanted to do was have that property look better than all the others at the same price point. It was fresh, it was new. So there was real intention by pricing roughly 10,000 lower than all the others had started at in the beginning. And what that did was, I mean, they didn't want to underprice it. They were nervous. And I explained to them it's really easy to overprice a house. It's really hard to underprice a house. So psychologically, when buyers see value, oh, hey, this is not only new to market, been waiting all winter, but this is better than everything else on the market that's been sitting. And they go all in on that. And that's how we maximized values here. But what we haven't got into yet that I want your opinions on, because this is fun, is pricing is subjective. So, yes, this was similar to all those other units, but the interior condition might have varied. It might have been in a different location. They might have prepped the house differently from the others that are on the market. And now, when we talk about pricing strategy, we really have to talk about what is the listing going to be at the time of list? Because when you meet with the seller, when I come into your home, I'm going to make a lot of recommendations. You might take some of them, you might not do all of them, um, but we're going to price it based on the condition that it is when it goes on the market. So let's talk a little bit about listing prep.
So I think Mike's an expert at that because he handles all our listings. He's in every one of our listings from all our team members. So I'm sure he can address some of the preparation that we go into in a home.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on whether or not the home is occupied. Is it going to be vacant when we list it? Is it going to be occupied when we list it? Tidying up is definitely one of the biggest things if it is going to be occupied. We have a handful of vendors that can assist in junk removal, getting rid of clutter, um, staging. Even if you live in the unit, you can still have a stager come in, sort of like an interior designer, like move things around, make it appealing to the market. If it's vacant, we always recommend cleaning and staging to maximize the value. State some people think that vacant homes look bigger. I actually think the opposite, and I know a lot of people agree. Um, Staging makes the rooms look bigger than a vacant room.
Right.
It shows that you could fit the furniture in there and still have some extra space. Um, there's paint. We recommend painting is one of the biggest things that increase the value before getting home on the market. Even just I know Mike and I walked through a house recently. A lot of the rooms were dark colored, and the biggest thing we recommended was we've got to freshen up this paint. We've got to brighten it up. You walk in the front door and it's a little dark. It's nice. It's a cool feeling, but to the buyer, they want to walk into a nice bright home. So I think paint is obviously one of the biggest things to get a
That
home
was a
ready
week and
to
a half
sell.
ago. We walked through this listing. This listing's coming on in June. It's beautiful colonial. It's already been painted. The
Has it
first the
really?
first floor is already done.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
Um,
fast.
that's how seriously we take listing prep, because it's the difference between, I mean, paint especially. I mean, that's the difference between tens of thousands of dollars on your projected sale
Right.
price, depending on the range, of course. But painting can be expensive, but it's one of those few things in real estate that you can do to prep a listing from sale, maybe along with like landscaping and bathroom work, that will actually increase the selling price for you
Yeah.
for dollar for dollar.
I think there are certain um, things we do to prepare that they accomplish two things. One, you're expecting the house to sell quicker, so time is money. It's an old adage, but it's so true in real estate. And the amount of money that you spend on a home, you want to get much more than that back. And usually, it's the simplest cosmetic items that we do: staging, painting, preparing. Um, those are the ones with the highest return. It's not doing a major renovation unless that's the intent from the beginning, to do a full, complete gut or renovating.
Sure. So now let's talk a little bit about past sales and how that impacts proper pricing, and how we kind of advise our clients based on the condition and location and type of unit they have, or listing, single family or townhouse or condominium, multi. Can we talk a little bit about past sales and how that works? Because this is where things get a little complicated.
In what regard are you?
In terms of taking something that's sold in the past and trying to compare it to your future listing, apples to apples, it doesn't really work.
So I think it's more obvious when you're working in a complex like the Village in Watertown. Um, that association, it's a 306 units there. So it's easy to see comparative pricing with preparing a unit, not preparing, staging, not staging, doing some updates, proper pricing. And again, that's I think the topic of today is strategically pricing a property. You'll see properties in that association go well over asking that have a certain price point that a similar property was on the market months before. They overpriced it, reduce it a second time before it sells. And most of the time, when you are reducing prices, you get less than you would have gotten if you strategically priced it in the first place.
Now let's talk about singles because the village that's easy for us to look at past sales data. There's a ton of it, but now let's take a single family in Belmont or Watertown. Both four-bedroom colonials around 2,000 square feet. One has a garage, one doesn't. One is near Watertown Square. One's in a Belmont neighborhood without any walkable restaurants, shops, retail. Yard space is different. One is fenced, one is not. One's sitting on a 10,000 square feet. The other's on 15. Let's talk about subjective pricing here and how we advise our sellers on something like that.
Well, I think once we collect the data of square footage, style, location, and you make those adjustments, then you're uh, looking to price that home in a range that's going to attract the most visitors to that home, whether those visitors be online or in person. So it's a pricing process that we go through in each home individually, right?
Yeah, and how do we value things like garages and yard space? And I'm trying to make a point that it's very subjective. It's going to be different for every single buyer what
Sure.
that's worth. So that's why we give values and ranges, and we don't just put out a listing at $800,000 for a four-bedroom colonial. It doesn't Pricing doesn't work like that because you have three cars, I have two, or you need more yard space than I do. You need it fenced because you have a dog. So now all of a sudden, buyers' opinions and values will be different for the same listing.
Well, I think that it addresses the needs of that particular buyer. So one buyer may have an idea that they need a two-car garage because they've got a collectible car, or they're looking for more yard space because they entertain a lot outdoors, or a family room for the same reason. Someone may need four bedrooms, not necessarily all bedroom space, but if they have a home office that they work from, that's more important to them to have the extra bedroom than to have a garage at all. So when we price, we create a range, and then the individual consumer will drive how well that home fits their needs. And that's why when you have a home um, with multiple office situations, and the offers are at a very broad range sometimes, there's sometimes one person that the home strikes all their needs and that has more value to that person than someone who it's missing some of the components of what they're looking for.
And one thing that really stands out to me is the difference between the median priced single family or condo in a market and a luxury property. Because not only do the ranges get inflated and the willingness to take on different price points within that range, but for like a first-time home buyer, let's say it's utilitarian. So does this property on the market fit my needs? Where a luxury buyer is going to ask, how can I make this property fit my needs?
Right,
And that varies all throughout, the $1 million range, the $2 million range, the $3 million range and up.
right.
So that obviously gets a little more subjective. But when we're pricing it out, it definitely adds this nuance to where we want to list this at, so we can kind of encourage those conversations amongst
Right.
buyers.
And Mike, you see it with some of our listings that we're trying to prepare that home for sale because some of our consumers, they don't have, once they have that initial down payment and uh, their closing costs, there's not a lot of money left over
Hmm.
to start doing improvements.
Right. So it's important to try and get as much done to maximize.
One thing I've noticed about pricing over the last, my entire career, about 16 years in the business now, um, the difference between how we valued certain types of property 20 years ago versus today. And what I'm getting into is I think you'd always taught me, first and foremost about location value. Oh, that house on the busy street's going to take longer to sell. The below grade space, like a finished basement, isn't as valuable as above grade. And well, I think those principles didn't go away entirely. You still see some of that. I don't think it's affected because of demand as it was 20 years ago. I see houses on busy streets selling just as quickly as the house in the neighborhood. Maybe there's preferences, maybe it's opening up to a different buyer pool, but there's so much demand, it's amazing what buyers will overlook and how that affects pricing strategy.
I think it all comes down to value. It's a home on a busier street is, if it's priced properly, has a certain value to it. All features of a home affect value, all, whether it's size, bedroom count, location, a sloping lot versus a level lot. All those different components of a particular piece of real estate have a certain value. And the fact that a home might be on a busier street or a sloping lot, if it's priced properly, it's going to sell at a fair market range, and it's going to sell at a reasonably quick uh, time point.
Yeah, and to chime in on that, I mean, this is happening right now with buyers I have that are looking in southern Mass down by Attleboro. There's a house on the market in Attleboro that just came on, 500,000 on a main road. It's renovated top to bottom, not new renovation, but it's within the last 10 years. Everything's nice, move-in ready, nice yard, nice deck. It's on a main road, double yellow line, and there's similar priced homes in neighborhoods that need a lot of work. And this particular home had lines out the door at the open house this past weekend, just because they see the full renovation home. They may not even notice that it's on a main road until they get there. And a lot of people will be turned off by that, sure, but a lot of people are still going to go inside and see it. They're going to see the difference that they're going to get living on the main road versus what they're going to pay for in a neighborhood, and they're going to outweigh the options, and a lot of them are going with the fully renovated home on that main road
Right.
over a house that needs work.
Because they can finance
Yeah.
those renovations over time instead of buying that home and then trying to fund those renovations out of pocket
Yeah.
as they go, and sometimes that's difficult.
And that goes back to your point with the condo you sold in Waltham, where you priced it similar or just a little below those other ones. This was priced just a little below because of its location. And my clients didn't put an offer on this, but I'm sure it went over ask with
Happy sellers.
first.
Yeah.
So our conversation has bounced around a little bit, and it's because it's subjective, and there's a lot of factors that go into pricing a home. We don't rely on automated valuation models, AVMs. That's the Zestimate. That's Realtor.com's AVM. They're nice for ballpark figures, but when it comes down to really, more accurate price ranges, like this is the conversations we're having behind the scenes. And to summarize everything, if I'm meeting with you as a potential seller client, these are the things I want you to focus on. And if we can create kind of a bullet point list here, pricing on the lower end of fair market value range will maximize offers. Um,
So I think timing on the market has a lot to do with value too. So when you price a home, what's the strategy? If you've got um, a lot of competition on the market, you're going to price it more competitively. If you're the only home on the market, you can get into a little bit higher price point uh, because you're the only game in town. So,
yeah, and to your point, that's part of the reason why we price the Waltham condo so low is because my clients had just purchased a house. They did not want to carry two mortgages.
right.
So obviously that factors in as well. So considering timing and how that impacts your eventual selling price, pricing on the lower range of fair market value because it's hard to underprice a house, really easy to overprice. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your strategy there. Just pricing conservatively is more often than not gonna benefit your sellers more. It creates a buzz around the house. It creates more activity. More buyers see it at once. They see it a lot of competition at an open house. It's always going to increase the chances of going above asking.
Great point. Great point. So obviously, this is very general knowledge. Your situation at home is going to be very unique, even if the house is very similar to somebody else's that was on the market last week. If you have any questions on your specific situation, reach out to us. I'm Mike DelRose Jr. with the DelRose McShane team, and thank you for watching.